Everybody, I am going to tell you something right now that I genuinely believe is going to surprise you. And I mean surprise you in a way that most weather videos right now are not talking about. Because right now, all anybody is saying is heat, 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 dome, heat index, dangerous heat. And yes, that is absolutely real, and we have covered it. But there is a whole other side to this forecast that almost nobody is discussing right now. And when you hear all of it together, you are going to understand why I named this video what I did. Because this next forecast, it is going to surprise everyone. And I mean everyone, everybody. So stay with me all the way through this, because every single section of this video has something in it that most people do not know is coming. And when you understand the full picture, not just the heat, not just the storms, but the complete pattern playing out right now, you are going to be genuinely shocked at what July 2026 is about to bring to different parts of this country at the same time. Let me start with what the WPC just issued today, June 26th. The Weather Prediction Center's extended forecast discussion is official right now. And buried inside this forecast, right alongside the heat dome warnings, is a sentence that most people are going to skip right over. It says, a temperature dichotomy will exist across the country starting this weekend as the deep upper trough heralds the arrival of much cooler conditions across the Pacific Northwest and Northern Rockies, with highs running on the order of 15 to 25 degrees below late June averages. 15 to 25 degrees below late June averages. Everybody. The WPC then says this will likely be cold enough to come close to some new daily record low temperatures. Record low temperatures. And then, in the very same forecast, they say that the opposite will hold true from the plains to the Ohio Valley, with widespread above average temperatures expected, with the strong upper ridge developing. So here is what is happening right now. At the very same moment that the heat dome is building to dangerous historic levels across the central and eastern United States, bringing what AccuWeather is calling the most widespread 90-degree weather so far this year across the central and eastern states, the Pacific Northwest is about to experience record-challenging cold. In late June, going into early July, everybody, we're talking about an atmospheric seesaw of historic proportions. Most people have absolutely no idea it is coming. Let me talk about the cold side first, everybody, because this is the part of this forecast that is flying completely under the radar. And for the people who live in it, it is going to be jaw-dropping. Here's the setup. The WPC's official extended forecast discussion issued at 2:30 a.m. this morning confirms that an anomalous upper low is digging deep into the northwestern states starting this weekend. Now, the word anomalous is very important there. That is the government's way of saying this is not a normal routine weather system. This is unusual for late June. You expect to be in the heart of summer warmth by now in the Pacific Northwest. You expect the long, glorious June days. You do not expect a deep upper-level low carving southward into the region, bringing temperatures 15 to 25 degrees below normal, and the WPC flagging the potential for record low temperatures. And here is what makes this even more remarkable, everybody. The same upper low is going to be cold enough to bring snow, actual snow, to the higher elevations of the Montana and Idaho Rockies. Let me say that again. Snow in the mountains of Montana and Idaho in the last days of June 2026. The WPC confirmed that rain and mountain snow over central and western Montana should still be ongoing, with several inches of snow accumulation possible for the highest mountain ranges. Several inches of mountain snow at the end of June, while the rest of the country is broiling under a heat dome that is pushing heat index values toward 110 degrees in the Mid-South and Gulf Coast. Now, here is who this is going to surprise the most. People in Seattle, Washington, people in Portland, Oregon, people in Boise, Idaho, people in Missoula, Montana, Spokane, Billings. These communities have been dealing with above normal temperatures and drought conditions for weeks and weeks leading into this summer. The NIFC seasonal outlook confirms that May in Oregon and Washington was running 3 to 7 degrees above normal, with most locations receiving less than 30 to 50% of normal precipitation. The snowpack was well below normal heading into summer. Drought was expanding. And now, all of a sudden, they are about to get a midsummer cold outbreak that drops their temperatures to records not seen in late June in potentially decades, going from 3 to 7 degrees above normal to 15 to 25 degrees below normal in the span of a few days. That is a 20 to 30 degree temperature swing in the opposite direction. That is extraordinary, everybody. But wait, there's more to the Northwest surprise, because that same cold trough dropping into the Northwest is also going to drastically change the wildfire situation out there. The NIFC seasonal fire outlook was calling for above normal significant fire potential across much of the West in June. The Greater Four Corners, the Central Great Basin, the Inland Northwest, Northern California, all flagged for elevated fire danger. And then here comes this cold, anomalous upper low crashing in, bringing precipitation and dramatically reducing temperatures across the very heart of the highest fire risk zones. For wildfire suppression crews working across Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington right now, this cold system is a gift. It is completely unexpected relief at a moment when the drought and the heat had put those western forests and grasslands right on the edge. Now, here is the flip side for the Northwest that they need to understand. This cold outbreak, as welcome as the cooler temperatures will be, also comes with a real weather hazard. Cold air moving down from Canada behind this trough is going to create strong surface high pressure over the Northwest. And along the coast of Northern California and southwestern Oregon, the CPC's probabilistic hazards outlook has actually designated a slight risk of high winds for the period of July the 2nd through 4th, due to the tight pressure gradient between that surface high and the heat dome to the east. So for the coastal communities of Northern California and southwestern Oregon, you have a wind risk arriving right on the 4th of July holiday from a cold system, while the rest of the country is sweltering. That is genuinely a surprising and unusual setup, everybody. Strong winds, cold temperatures, mountain snow. At the same moment, the Midwest is hitting 100-degree heat indices. That is a breathtaking contrast. Now let's get to the heat dome. But I want to tell you something about this heat dome that nobody else is pointing out. Because, yes, everybody knows it is coming. Yes, it is going to be dangerous. We have covered the city-by-city breakdown. But here's the surprising part of the heat dome story that most people are missing. The core of this heat dome is going to be centered somewhere that is going to catch people completely off guard. It is not going to be primarily centered on Texas. Texas is used to this. It is not going to be primarily centered on the Deep South. The Gulf states deal with this kind of heat every summer. The core of this heat dome, according to both AccuWeather and the WPC's extended forecast, is going to be centered on the Ohio Valley, the middle portion of the Mississippi Valley, and the Tennessee Valley for much of next week. The Ohio Valley, everybody. Memphis, Tennessee, Nashville, Louisville, Cincinnati, Columbus, Ohio, Huntington, West Virginia. These are not your typical epicenters for the most extreme heat in the country during a heat dome event, but that is exactly where the strongest mid-level high pressure and the highest 500 millibar heights are going to be focused, right over the Ohio Valley and mid-Mississippi Valley. And then, AccuWeather said something else that caught my attention in their forecast, published just yesterday, June 25th. They flagged the potential for complexes of thunderstorms moving from east to west from the southern Atlantic coast to the Gulf Coast on the southern rim of the heat dome. And they specifically noted that these will have to be watched for potentially acquiring tropical characteristics. Tropical characteristics, everybody. That means these storm systems could organize and develop quasi-tropical features as they move westward from the Atlantic back into the Gulf of Mexico during July. That is a very unusual statement to make about summertime convection, but it makes sense when you understand the setup. The heat dome is going to drive very moist, very unstable air along its southern and southeastern periphery, and the combination of warm Gulf water temperatures and anomalous atmospheric circulation could indeed support convective organization with tropical characteristics. This is a surprise nobody is talking about. The heat dome that is supposed to suppress tropical activity could paradoxically help generate quasi-tropical systems along its own southern rim. And here's another surprise, hiding in plain sight inside the heat dome forecast. Dr. Ryan Maue noted just this week in his Weather Trader briefing that as the ridge strengthens and the tropical moisture feed from the Gulf of Mexico gets dialed down into the southeast, the pattern actually transitions toward a drier regime. And dry plus hot is a very different animal than humid plus hot. For the states right underneath the core of the ridge, Tennessee, Kentucky, southern Indiana, portions of Ohio, the lack of moisture could mean daytime highs running closer to the actual air temperature rather than being somewhat moderated by evaporation. That means the recorded temperature, not just the heat index, pushes higher. And in an El Nino summer where the Climate Impact Company has specifically projected that Great Plains and Southeast drought will expand during midsummer. That dryness baking under this dome is going to cause rapid soil moisture depletion and accelerated drought development across exactly the same areas where the most extreme heat is centered. Now here is the part of this forecast that I think is the most important for everyone to understand, and the most surprising, because it changes the risk profile entirely. The simultaneous existence of record cold in the northwest and record heat in the center and east of the country is not just a weather curiosity. It is the engine driving the most dangerous, severe weather threat of this entire summer season. Everybody, here is the thing about severe weather. The most violent thunderstorms and tornadoes do not happen in the hottest air or the coldest air. They happen at the boundary between the two. They happen where that 15 to 25 degree below normal cold air from the Pacific Northwest slams into that 100-degree heat dome air over the central and eastern states. That collision zone, that boundary, is going to be one of the most energetically charged atmospheric battlegrounds we have seen all summer, and it is going to produce some truly violent weather. AccuWeather confirmed this setup just yesterday, June 25th. Their forecast for the rim of the heat dome over the coming days is alarming. They flagged a higher risk of a derecho developing on Saturday and Saturday night as the cold air from the northwest trough drives into the southern plains and Midwest. A derecho, everybody. A derecho is one of the most underrated and underappreciated severe weather threats that exists. It is a long-lived, fast-moving, organized band of thunderstorms that can produce widespread damaging winds of 75, 85, even 100 miles per hour or more across a corridor hundreds of miles long. It does not look like a tornado on radar. It arrives as a bow-shaped line of storms, and it can absolutely devastate crops, down power lines across entire states, and damage or destroy homes and buildings over an enormous area in a matter of hours. AccuWeather specifically warned about the crop damage risk in Minnesota, similar to what happened there in mid-June. Minnesota barely recovered from one derecho event and now faces the potential for another. And beyond Minnesota, this derecho risk extends along the entire corridor where the cold air and the heat dome air are fighting for control, from the Dakotas southward through Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and into Michigan. Here are your cities on highest alert for this severe weather threat going into this weekend and early next week. Fargo, North Dakota, you are in the storm corridor. Sioux Falls, South Dakota, you need to be watching the sky. Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, be ready for violent weather. Des Moines, Iowa, elevated risk. Rochester, Minnesota, watch closely. La Crosse, Wisconsin, keep your weather alerts on. And Green Bay, Wisconsin. And for all of you in the Chicago metropolitan area, you are right on the edge of this risk zone, and the timing of these storms could bring dangerous conditions right into the metro. But here is the second surprise inside the storm setup, everybody. AccuWeather also flagged a shift in the jet stream later in the week that will bring the risk of damaging thunderstorms from eastern Canada into the northeastern United States. So as the storm track moves around the dome, it is eventually going to bring organized, severe weather threat all the way into New York, Pennsylvania, and New England. And according to AccuWeather, the timing of these rounds of thunderstorms is going to be absolutely critical for the heat in the Northeast Interstate 95 corridor. Because where storms hold off until later in the day or the evening, temperatures may surge into the 90s before any storms arrive. That means cities along the Boston to Washington, D.C. corridor could see their hottest temperatures of the year right before or during a severe storm event. Peak heat and severe weather arriving at the same time. That is a very dangerous combination. Everybody, let me talk about something else that is going to surprise people, and that is where the wildfire threat shifts after this cold system moves through the Northwest. Because most people assume the cold system solves the western fire problem. And for the Northwest specifically, yes, temporarily. The cold and the precipitation will help significantly in the short term across the Northwest fire zones. But here's the surprise. The WPC noted that the wildfire and fire weather situation is going to remain extremely critical across the Great Basin right now. And the CPC Hazards Outlook specifically highlighted extremely critical fire weather conditions expected over parts of the Great Basin on Friday, June 26th. The Great Basin, everybody. That is Nevada, Utah, portions of eastern Oregon, and Idaho. While the Northwest gets its surprising cold relief, the Great Basin is simultaneously experiencing some of the most dangerous fire weather conditions of the summer. And as the cold system eventually pushes through, the winds behind it, those same winds creating the high wind risk on the northern California and southwestern Oregon coast, are also going to blow dry and gusty across the Great Basin and the Four Corners region. Those post-frontal winds are extremely dangerous for fire spread. And then looking beyond this weekend, the NIFC July through September outlook says that above normal significant fire potential is expected to develop across southeast Texas and western Louisiana in July, while persisting in portions of the northern plains. Texas and Louisiana, everybody. Two states that have been in drought conditions are now being flagged as areas of above normal significant fire potential as we go into July, and the heat dome bakes the ground dry. Nobody is talking about wildfires in Texas and Louisiana in July right now because all the attention is on the heat dome. But while people are focused on heat indices, dry grass and rangeland in those states is going to be reaching critically dangerous moisture levels, and it only takes one spark. Now here's the part of this video that I have been building toward. Everybody. And this is genuinely the most surprising piece of this entire forecast. Because while everyone is focused on the heat dome, and they should be, it is dangerous. Very few people are paying attention to what the models are showing in the second half of July. And when I tell you what it shows, some of you are going to be very relieved. And some of you are going to be confused, because the second half of July forecast is the biggest surprise of all. Here is what the Missouri River Basin Forecast Center's July through September 2026 Regional Climate Outlook says. And this just came out within the last 4 days. Everybody, this is very fresh data. For July, the outlook for temperature in the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys and Great Lakes shows the forecast leaning toward either equal chances or colder than normal. Colder than normal. For the core states that are right now being baked by the heat dome, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the Great Lakes region, the July overall temperature outlook from the government is equal chances or below normal for the month as a whole. Now, how is that possible? How can you have a violent, record-challenging heat wave for the first week of July and then have the month come out equal chances or colder than normal overall? Here's how, everybody. The climate outlook folks are factoring in something that the models are hinting at for mid-July that almost nobody is talking about right now. They are seeing a pattern transition coming, a shift, where that heat dome eventually breaks down and is replaced by a more amplified trough of colder air across the north-central U.S. and Great Lakes in the mid to late July timeframe. The cooler than average sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Alaska, the Gulf of America, that is the new official name for the Gulf of Mexico, and along parts of the Atlantic coast are being considered as drivers that could swing the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes toward cooler than normal conditions for the second half of July. That is the minus PDO influence, a negative Pacific to Cattle oscillation, acting as a long-term break on persistent heat across the northern states. And here's the farming community and agriculture angle of this, everybody, because this is huge. AccuWeather senior meteorologist Chad Merrill specifically stated that rainfall will likely be meaningful in the Corn Belt this summer with a much lower risk of drought in the Midwest. And Climate Impact Company's July outlook specifically projects that the interior West is going to be rain-cooled and that wet weather extends from Oklahoma all the way through the Ohio Valley and into New England during July. While the plains and the southeast suffer under drought and heat, the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes, the exact region that just got roasted by the heat dome, may experience significant precipitation relief in the second half of July as the pattern flips. For farmers in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, you are going to go through one of the most challenging first weeks of July for your crops in recent memory. But the second half of the month may bring the rain that saves the season. And here is the flip side of that mid-July relief. The surprise that the heat does not go away for the people who expect relief first. AccuWeather confirmed just this week that while the heat dome in the central states is forecast to ease up during the second week of July, the core of the heat will then shift into the west toward the middle of July. So the southwest, Arizona, Nevada, California's inland valleys, which are about to get temporary relief from the current western heat wave thanks to the cold trough, they are going to turn around and get baked again by the same heat dome as it migrates westward in mid-July. The heat is moving, everybody. It is not going away. It is rotating from the central and eastern U.S. back toward the west in mid-July, and the people in Phoenix, Las Vegas, and the California deserts who think they are getting their break, it is going to be a short one. Now, everybody, let me zoom all the way out and talk about the biggest surprise that could still be coming. And this one is not about July. This one is about what happens to the full rest of the year. Because the developing Super El Nino is about to become the most important weather story of 2026 and 2027 combined. And most people have no idea just how extreme this could get. Here are the facts as we know them today. The Center for Climate Systems Research and the International Research Institute for Climate and Society's ENSO Plume forecast gives a 98% probability of El Nino forming and a 97 to 98% probability of it continuing through the end of the year, a range that Columbia University's climate school called remarkably high and narrow. European climatologists have declared a 100% probability of a super El Nino developing by November. Computer modeling is projecting a temperature anomaly in the equatorial Pacific of 3 to 4 degrees Celsius above normal, a level of ocean heat that has not been recorded since 1877. Everybody. 18 to 77. That was 149 years ago. And here is what that means for the United States going forward. Because this is where the surprises really pile up. AccuWeather senior meteorologist Chad Merrill stated that the global temperature signal tied to El Nino may not peak immediately. The highest global temperatures linked to this El Nino would more likely occur in 2027 rather than 2026, because there is usually a delay to the hottest temperatures during the development of an El Nino. So while this summer is already historic for heat, the actual worst global impacts from this super El Nino may still be more than a year away. That means the weather surprises we are seeing right now in June and July of 2026, the dramatic temperature dichotomies, the unexpected cold outbreaks, the violent severe weather on dome boundaries, the quasi-tropical systems developing in unusual places. These are just the opening act, everybody. The main event is still being set up out in the Pacific Ocean, and Severe Weather Europe described this transition specifically as a turning point for summer and potentially the remainder of this year, noting that the 2026 North American summer season is entering a critical transition phase and that the latest data confirms a strong El Niño event is not only developing, but is already showing early signs of its presence in global atmospheric circulation. We are witnessing the first detectable changes in pressure and temperature patterns across the United States and Canada. The first detectable changes. That means what we are seeing right now, as extraordinary as it is just the beginning of this El Niño's fingerprint on our weather. The full hand has not yet been played. Everybody, let me give you a quick city-by-city breakdown of the surprises so you can know what to watch for where you live. Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland, Boise, Spokane. You're about to get a cold surprise nobody saw coming. Temperatures 15 to 25 degrees below normal, possibly record daily low temperatures for late June. Mountain snow in the Rockies above you. Enjoy it, because the heat returns for you in mid-July. Northern Rockies, Missoula, Helena, Billings, Great Falls, Bozeman. Several inches of mountain snow are possible. Fire weather threat is temporarily reduced. This is genuine surprise relief for your fire season. Northern California and southwest Oregon coasts. A surprise wind threat for July then 2 or 4. High winds designated in the CPC hazards outlook right over the 4th of July holiday weekend. Not what anyone expected from a holiday weekend. Central and eastern U.S., Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, Mississippi Valley. The heat dome is centered right on top of you. Memphis, Nashville, Louisville, Cincinnati, Columbus. You're in the bullseye of the strongest heat in the country. Not Texas, not Florida. You. That is the surprise. Great Lakes, Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, Minneapolis. You went from running below normal in June to potentially one of your hottest first weeks of July ever. And then, mid to late July may flip you back toward cooler than normal with heavy rain. The whiplash is real. Northeast Corridor. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. Severe weather arriving at the same time as your hottest temperatures of the year. The storm timing is critical. If it holds off until the afternoon, triple-digit heat indices followed by violent thunderstorms. Watch the timing carefully. Gulf states and southeast. Surprise quasi-tropical activity developing on the southern rim of the heat dome. Not a named storm, not yet, but organized convection with tropical characteristics. Worth watching as July progresses. Great Basin, Nevada, Utah. The cold system brings no relief to you. You are stuck under the most critical fire weather conditions of the summer while the Northwest cools off. Everybody, I always want to take just a moment before I leave you, and today's verse feels more right than ever. Job 37 to 14:16. Hearken unto this, O Job. Stand still and consider the wondrous works of God. Dost thou know when God disposed them and caused the light of his cloud to shine? Dost thou know the balancings of the clouds, the wondrous works of him which is perfect in knowledge? Amen. Everybody, what we are watching right now across this country, record cold dropping into one corner, record heat building in the middle, violent storms along the boundaries, snow in July in the mountains, quasi-tropical systems on the southern rim of a heat dome, a super El Niño reshaping the entire planet's weather from 8,000 miles away. These are the wondrous works of God, and God alone is perfect in knowledge. None of us saw all of this coming, not the models, not the meteorologists, not me. The full picture is more extraordinary than any forecast ever captured. All glory goes to our Father in heaven, Yahweh. I pray every single day that he keeps you and your families safe through every surprise this summer has left to throw at us. Amen. Hallelujah. Amen. Everybody, don't share this video, because right now everyone you know is only hearing about the heat. They need to know about the cold outbreak in the Northwest. They need to know about the snow in the Rockies. They need to know about the derecho risk on the dome boundary. They need to know about the mid-July pattern flip. And they need to know that the biggest surprise of 2026 may still be coming, with this super El Niño still intensifying out in the Pacific. Rising day, everybody. Amen.